City, where again we're following breaking news. The walls could be closing in on former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. A source close to Cohen tells me he does expect to be arrested soon. But is that what he's telling all of his friends? And according to multiple people familiar with the matter, Michael Cohen has yet to speak with federal prosecutors involved in the inquiry. His legal team is still going through the evidence seized in the raids on his homes and offices. Multiple officials say any conversation, though, about a plea deal as of right now is far too premature. So could all this news simply be part of a new legal strategy? Could it be a smoke signal to his former boss, the president, who he might believe abandoned him at the height of his legal troubles? Could it be both? So the big question we're asking today, if Michael Cohen is indicted, will he flip on Donald Trump? Gabe Sherman is a special correspondent for Vanity Fair. Danny Savalos is an MSNBC legal analyst. Natasha Bertrand is a staff writer with The Atlantic and an MSNBC contributor. And Tom Dupree is a former lawyer for George W. Bush. Dupree served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General and is now a partner with Gibson and Dunn. Gabe, let's start with you. My reporting from a source close to Cohen lines up with your reporting that he is worried about being arrested on Friday or potentially next week. There's also some new reporting from our colleagues here at NBC that he's telling other friends different things, that no, he is not worried about it. This has kind of been the way it has gone when reporting Michael Cohen news. There will initially be reports about how he's feeling from people who do know him well and people that reporters have built a relationship with and trust. And then when that starts to break through into the news cycle, suddenly there's a reversal and it's like, oh, no, I never said that. So parse through it, make sense of it for us.
Yeah, I mean, this has been, sort of part of the cycle from the beginning of the time that his office and hotel room and residence were raided. You know, he said originally, Michael Cohen said that he would take a bullet for Donald Trump. And then as the weeks dragged on and the president wasn't reaching out and helping him and it didn't seem like there would be a legal way out for him, he started to signal privately to friends, probably in hopes that it would get out to the news media, that he was feeling abandoned, he was emotional, he didn't want to go to jail for 30 years and, miss his wife and children. And so there was this kind of double game going on. And now this morning, as we learned, people close spoke to Michael Cohen. One source in particular who spoke to him directly said that he worried about being indicted as early as Friday, perhaps next week. He was telling people in recent days, as much as last week, that he thought there was a chance he could be arrested. So I know that from my reporting, what he's signaling to others perhaps as some sort of disinformation campaign is possible, but what we do know is that he is under a credible amount of legal pressure and at times has signaled to people that he feels like the end could be coming legally for him.
It's not just legal pressure, though. We are being told that it's potentially financial pressure as well. The New York Times has this also, and they report Mr. Cohen's current legal team is expected to stay with him for the rest of the week as they struggle to complete a laborious review of a trove of documents and data files seized from him by the authorities 2 months ago. But after that review is finished, he will seek new legal counsel, the people familiar with the case said. The issue is primarily over payment of the legal bills of one of his lawyers, Stephen Ryan, according to a person familiar with the discussions.
Well, that clearly is right out of the Donald Trump playbook, right? You stiff your lawyers, you rack up bills, and you don't pay. I think this is clearly a complicated situation, whether he's losing his legal team because of financial issues or the fact that they are not, these are document review specialists. To my knowledge, they're not the people you would take to go to actual trial or deal with
not
the SDNY.
Not the white-collar criminal attorneys that would be suited to go up against the SDNY. Danny, what do you make of this?
It's entirely possible this is just what we call a Rule 1 situation. In other words, the first rule for defense attorneys is to get paid. And if attorneys are not getting paid, that may be an instance in which they can voluntarily withdraw. There are also other situations where ethically an attorney must withdraw. That's if the client wants to commit a crime. I'm not saying that's happening here. If they want to commit a future crime, or if the client simply wants to fire them because there's some irretrievable breakdown in communication. Maybe they're disagreeing on strategy. But failure to pay your lawyers is a common reason for attorneys to withdraw, especially in white-collar cases like this, where the federal government is taking play one out of their playbook, which is a war of economic attrition on a defendant or a suspect like Michael Cohen, where in the beginning of the investigation, people like Michael Cohen often say, I will never cooperate with the government. A year down the road, 2 years down the road, when their finances are depleted, they may sing a different tune, especially if they're looking at some serious sentencing guidelines.
Tom, why would Cohen believe that he's about to be arrested? We've been talking about timing, looking at the Manafort case, and when Manafort was indicted, there's also been some talk among those close to him that there's been some signal from the SDNY to his lawyers. Does any of that make sense to you?
It does, Katie, and it wouldn't surprise me if the prosecutors were signaling a possible timeline for Michael Cohen. I would say this, that look, while it is very common to change your lawyers because of a fee dispute or because of a strategic difference of opinion, I do think it's a bit of a coincidence that everything seems to be coming to a head right now, in that it appears he potentially may be on the verge of indictment, and at that time, at this precise moment, he's changing horses. He's bringing in a new team of lawyers. That could mean that he's going to take this in a different legal direction. It could mean that he's lawyering up to fight this in trial, or it could mean he wants to bring in plea bargain specialists to try to cut a good deal.
Natasha, I was talking to somebody, a staffer still, that works for Donald Trump, and I asked that person if Donald Trump would be upset by this. And the person was adamant, no, Donald Trump won't be upset by this. And I said, hey, hold on. Donald Trump has been upset about the Cohen raid and what's happening with his fixer, his personal attorney, quite openly. We've seen it on Twitter. We've seen him go off in a cabinet meeting in front of cameras. And this person said specifically, when it comes to the campaign and what the campaign has turned over, there's nothing that was nefarious or criminal or wrong with the interactions that Michael Cohen had with the campaign, at least from what they have on their servers. How would, though, Donald Trump be upset, or why would Donald Trump be upset with the other things that Michael Cohen could potentially talk to a prosecutor about?
Well, this extends far beyond the campaign, right? I mean, Michael Cohen has been the president's essentially right-hand man for the better part of a decade. So there is a ton that he could tell prosecutors about Donald Trump's financial history, about the business deals that he's done that might be of interest to Robert Mueller. And whereas Michael Cohen has said in the past that he would take a bullet for the president, that he would rather jump off a bridge than turn against him. The president really has not seemed to return that sentiment. On Twitter, he said that, you know, Michael Cohen would not flip on him, that the media just wants to see it happen because it would be a big story. But then on the other hand, he said, but even if Michael Cohen did decide to cooperate with prosecutors, you know, he would be lying anyway, essentially. And that is an indication that even if he were to come out and start talking to prosecutors, that the president is essentially preempting that by saying that Michael Cohen would not be telling the truth. That is not exactly a vote of confidence in his former attorney. And if I were Michael Cohen right now, I would be seriously thinking about my family's financial future, especially because the taxi business that he owned is roughly $12 million in debt. He's put his home up for collateral to the bank. So he really is running kind of on a shoestring right now. I'd be thinking twice about racking up further legal bills to be loyal to a president who doesn't seem to be returning the favor. Oh,
and let's remind everybody, Michael Cohen is a husband. He's a father of 2 kids, and he has a lot that's on his plate right now. So there is a serious question of who he's going to be more loyal to, himself and his family, or the president, if that comes to pass. And we have to say if, because obviously no indictment has been filed as of this moment. Gabe, just let's go back to our original topic. Talk to me about how complicated it can be to report on the people surrounding the president and the president's world.
Yeah, I mean, clearly a lot of the people who have worked with the president have taken, studied him and figured out what works for him, which is to both, use the media, but oftentimes, you tell one person one thing, you tell the other person the other thing, you create chaos. Donald Trump thrives in chaos, and many of the people around him also thrive in that chaos. So it is entirely possible possible that Michael Cohen is telling a certain individual one thing, and he's telling another person who has connections to the news media another thing, and those things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. They are just two different versions that Michael Cohen wants out there.
And then when we're talking about Cohen and the smoke signals he could be sending to the president, why would those close to Cohen, those who've spoken with Cohen directly and those who know him well, why would they believe that this idea that he could cooperate, being floated out there in the press, an ABC News report, why would they believe that that could be a smoke signal to the president?
Well, clearly, you know, what I've learned in talking to people at the White House and around them is that the Russia investigation, they feel, has been sort of contained. The Trump's Twitter attacks have sort of delegitimized the threat that Mueller poses, at least in their eyes. But what the wild card to them is what Michael Cohen knows. It's been reported that he tape recorded a lot of phone conversations. He was involved in the president's personal life and his professional life, and that to me is the wild card. So the Cohen threat and the smoke signal that he might flip and talk to prosecutors is designed, my sense, to get the president's attention.
The other news we have today is about Paul Manafort and, well, excuse me, about Robert Mueller, I should say. There's also news about Paul Manafort, but about Mueller requesting 75 new blank subpoenas against Paul Manafort. Tom, can you explain why he would be asking for those?
Yeah, this is something that typically happens when you're gearing up for a trial, and that you anticipate you're going to be calling a lot of witnesses. You may not know exactly which witnesses you're going to call, and so typically what a prosecutor will do is exactly what Mueller's doing here, is you basically get a long stack of subpoenas that will subsequently...
I don't feel good about turning down money. Because my whole life I've been greedy, greedy, greedy. I've grabbed all the money I could get. I'm so greedy. I know the lobbyists. I mean, I've used the lobbyists. I mean, I've done very well with lobbyists. You know, I've always taken in money. I like money.
He'll get his facts straight.
I'm very greedy. Wow. I'm a greedy person. I shouldn't tell you that, but I've turned down millions and millions of dollars. I feel foolish actually doing it. You want to know the truth? I said, no, I don't want your $5 million. No, don't give me $2 million. I go back to, it's just not my way of life. I've always been greedy. I love money, right? I want to give all that up. I don't care. I have great executives. They'll run it. It's easy. It's going to be easy. But now I want to be greedy for the United States. I want to grab all that money. Wow. Well, this is a very perverted man.
What are you waiting for? Do it! Just do it!